Good evening, everyone. Gordon Causey, live and unscripted once again. Coming today, it's now January 2nd, so Happy New Year, Happy 2024. It's right now, it's 2:37 in the morning. I spent the day at a family gathering, and we got back very late. Fortunately for me, after having our New Year's Day lunch, dinner, everyone went out to see a movie, and I tapped out and said, "Go ahead." And I was the only one left behind, and I got to have a nice long nap in a completely empty house. And of course, as always, Candy the Wonder Pup is here. She knows what to expect. She saw me grab it. Come here, Pup. Lay down. Speak. Oh, that was a good one. Come on up. And now hopefully she won't go and find some noisy toy to push around with her nose and her paws and disrupt me. But I wanted to talk tonight about immigration, migration, stick whatever label on it you want. But before I do, as always, thank you for comments. Thank you for likes. Thank you for subscriptions. As I often say, I'm trying to inject my voice into the public discourse. I do think I offer something of a sane, rational viewpoint, and I often express ideas that are difficult, but I think I do it reasonably well. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. Again, comment field is open. I have no issue with criticism. I especially appreciate constructive criticism. Someone on Reddit just left a very nice, thoughtful comment that I really appreciated. At any rate, migration, immigration. It's a difficult topic to address because of the political climate in a country like Canada and in the United States and in much of the Western world, because we live in a binary world where everything is either good or bad, right or wrong, black or white, and any degree of nuance is wiped away. And immigration is widely perceived to be, oh, immigration is good. So if you speak negatively about immigration, you're a bad person. And I referenced at the end of my last video, I want to make a correction. I used the wrong term. There are two ways that births are measured. There's one called birth rate and another one called fertility rate. I was using fertility rate and calling it the birth rate. I should have been calling it the fertility rate. For a country to maintain its population at a steady level, the fertility rate needs to be 2.1. And what that means is that every woman in a population during her childbearing years needs to be having, on average, 2.1 children, and that will maintain the population. If the fertility rate is below 2.1, then the population will decline. If it's above, then the population grows. That's natural growth. It's not just fertility rate, though, that impacts a nation's population. Immigration also does. And if your fertility rate, Canada's fertility rate, I looked it up, it's 1.4. So on average, women in Canada have 1.4 children during their childbearing years. That's not enough to maintain the population. So for Canada's population to grow, which it has been, immigration fills the gap. And Canada has a long history of immigration, and immigration has been absolutely essential and is the reason why Canada is the country that it is now. I do think Canada and the Western world in general is on the decline, but we achieved a lot in the Western world in terms of quality and standards of living. But I do see that. I think we've hit the peak, and I do think we are on the downslope now. And in that video as well, I referenced the fact that it's been widely reported that in the third quarter of 2023, so that would be the months of July, August, September, during that 3-month period, a very short time, Canada brought in 430,000 immigrants. So just rounding it off to 400,000, that if that level of immigration is maintained over a protracted period, we're talking about 1.2 million people coming into Canada in a year. In the United States, I think it's even worse. It's certainly worse in terms of raw numbers. The US, of course, has a much larger population, 330, 340 million, somewhere in that range. They're adding, there are reports now that as many as in excess of 10,000 people per day are crossing the US-Mexican border. 10,000 people and more per day are coming into the United States. And if that's maintained, that's 300,000 a month. That's 3.6 million people a year. That's massive in terms of raw numbers. Do think Canada still, if we bring in 1.2 million in a year against a population of just, we're 38, 40 million, we're talking about adding a province the size of Manitoba, Saskatchewan. I think those provinces, that their total populations is only about 1 million or so each. So we're talking about adding a new province every year. And the strain this puts on a country are enormous. And the devil is always in the details. Immigration is good. However, to what degree? Canada has long been a haven, a welcoming country. And I've thought about this a lot and read a fair bit on it. And what I've learned is that, typically speaking, when you're dealing with immigrants who are coming from a country where English is not the first language, the first generation, so immigrant Q, if you will, the first generation of immigrants, mom and dad come in, say they're 35 years of age. And if they don't speak English as a first language, they will learn survival skills English. And this has been true with immigrants coming from Greece, from Portugal, from Italy. We've had large waves of immigration, and often, they're centric to specific countries. Large wave of Greek immigrants, large wave of Italian immigrants, large wave Portuguese immigrants. And often the people coming in, their facility in the English language is poor, but they learn enough survival skills. And people tend to cluster when they immigrate into a country like Canada. They tend to gravitate toward the larger centers, cities like Toronto, and they tend to situate themselves in enclaves, areas where they're surrounded by members of their own community. So in Toronto, there's, Pape and Danforth, the Greek area of town. I think it's St. Clair Avenue East is Little Italy. Downtown Dundas, west of the downtown on Dundas is Chinatown. You have these enclaves, and it helps those who have come into the country whose English language skills are not particularly strong. They're able to better survive. Now you get the second generation. So you have that first immigrant couple come in and they have children. The children will typically learn to speak both the heritage language and English perfectly. They're fluently bilingual. If we're dealing say it's Italy, and mom and dad don't speak English very well. Well, their kids will speak Italian pretty much perfectly and English perfectly. Then you get to the third generation, the grandchildren of the initial immigrants. And typically, what will happen is the grandchildren will understand the heritage language, but they don't speak it much, maybe a little. And then when you get to the fourth generation, the great grandchildren of that initial couple, and now the heritage language is pretty much gone. And they have integrated, contributed to, and enriched the fabric of the Canadian society. But we've never seen immigration to the degree that we're seeing it now, with 430,000 coming into the country in just a 3-month period. And again, if that's maintained, we're talking 1.2 million over the course of a year. And like I say, that's the size of a province like Alberta, or not Alberta. Alberta's 7-8 million. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are in and around 1 million in total population. This is, to my mind, it is insane. But as I mentioned in that last video, I think it's also by design. This is part of, if you follow the World Economic Forum, it's not a conspiracy theory. The World Economic Forum is an institution that exists in Davos, Switzerland. They have something of a campus there. I have never been. However, many Canadians have gone. Our prime ministers have gone. Stephen Harper, Justin Trudeau. The most recent one in February just passed. So coming up on a year ago now. It was Chrystia Freeland, who's our deputy prime minister. Donald Trump has gone to the World Economic Forum. Joe Biden, Obama, Clinton. They have a young leaders program, of which Justin Trudeau was a member of the World Economic Forum's Young Leaders program, as was Macron of France, the Prime Minister of Argentina. I forget the woman's name, but the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda or something like that. I forget her name. Governor Newsom of California. He's a member of this same Young Leaders program. And I think it's important to understand what the World Economic Forum is and what they do. It's an organization that was founded in the 1970s by an individual by the name of Klaus Schwab, born in 1938. So he was born just prior to the start of World War II. Everything I've read, his father was a Swiss industrialist who made his fortune dealing with the Nazis, involved with his company was working with Nazi Germany, and that's where the wealth came from. And it leads me to question an individual like Klaus Schwab's mentality. He's written a couple of books, either as the sole or contributing author. One is called The Great Reset. Many have heard of it. Another one is called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And when I read about when I hear that term, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the term that immediately comes to my mind is the Fourth Reich, because students of history will know that Germany referred to itself, Nazi Germany referred to itself as the Third Reich. And this World Economic Forum, I see it, it's basically a convergence of three primary entities. One, you have government officials like all the aforementioned world leaders. They participate. The corporate world participates hugely, the tech giants. I don't script these out, and sometimes my memory fails me, but I remember in the most recent one, the CEO of Pfizer was in Davos, Switzerland, because there were some alternative media outlets chasing him down and trying to confront him. So you have a government, corporate, and then you have the academic. our ivory tower academic institutions, the Yales, the Harvards, the Cambridges, the Oxfords, Canadian context, the McGills, the Queens, the University of Toronto's. So they're all coming together, and they try and map out the direction in which they think that the world should go. And they are pushing the world, this idea of globalization, this idea of erasing national borders, of having one world government. And they propose that this is a requirement, a necessity, because the path that the world is on now is unsustainable. And they push the UN toward bringing out these so-called Sustainability Development Goals, SDGs, which they've listed out 17 priorities, which is insane. And they center largely on how our resources are used, on mitigating the supposed big bad boogeyman of climate change, and addressing issues like world poverty and things like that. And there's a notion, very popular, that the world is overpopulated. This notion has been around a long time. There was a British economist, either in the 17 or 1800s, a long time ago. His name was Thomas Malthus, and he wrote on it, and he proposed that there were checks and balances that just occur naturally that keep the world's population in check. And they would be war, disease, and famine. And they serve to provide a check against overpopulation. However, with the dawn of the 20th century and massive improvements in sanitation, delivering clean water and things of this nature, world population has exploded. We're now at 8 billion, as everyone knows. And there was a book written in the 1960s, right around 1970, just a few years before, or just a year or two after, sometime right around 1970, a book came out called The Population Bomb, which was proposing a doomsday scenario where the world would go to 5, 6, 7, 8 billion, where we are now, and what a disaster it would be. You had movies like Soylent Green came out that was based, I think it was based on a book. I never read the book, but I saw the movie, Charlton Heston, and it's where New York City was so horribly overpopulated that the government had to provide food, and the food they provided was Soylent Green. If anyone's inclined to watch it, I don't want to give it away too much, but Soylent Green was the preferred food source for the population because it contained high levels of protein. And it's a dystopian novel. Charlton Heston, Edward G. Robinson, and a few other notable actors were in it. Good movie. Freaky, but that was and then that movie came out in the 1970s, and it kind of painted this picture of a grossly overpopulated planet and deprivations. Like, I never saw Hunger Games. A lot of people will know that one. I don't know much about the Hunger Games, but I can get a sense just from the title what it was about. And so there's this notion that we need to depopulate. And there's been a lot of speculation by a lot of people, including myself, with regard to the whole COVID scenario starting in 2020, that this was part and parcel of people have used the word plandemic, and that you have to be careful. I have to be careful because YouTube is hyper censored, hyper surveillance is huge on it, and it's done by algorithms, and if you say the wrong words or the wrong combination of words, your video can be taken down for community standards. No one really listens to it. Just you send off an alarm bell with an algorithm, and it makes having difficult discussing the important and the things that need to be discussed. You can't do it because in order to have meaningful conversations, you have to bring things up that are uncomfortable, like immigration. And as I mentioned in that last video, the Western world, the developed world, contributes basically zero to world population growth. If every nation on the face of the planet Earth had the fertility rate that exists in countries like Canada, the United States, and Western Europe, well, then our problem would not be overpopulation, it would be declining population. And there's a lot of crappy science that goes into these 17 sustainable development goals, because so much of what is thrust upon us as this is what science says is based on computer modeling, simulations, where incredibly chaotic systems, individuals create computer modeled programs that offer up simulations, but those models are based on only a small number, a few dozen variables, where the number of variables numbers in the thousands. It's too chaotic a system for a computer model to simulate. But now they put the label science on these computer modeled simulations, so people just fast forward and they say, okay, well, this has to be true because they're calling it science. And it's not science, it's magic 8-ball forecasting with a thin veneer of scientific rationale behind it. But at any rate, the reason the world is at 8+ billion people now is because of developing nations, and their fertility rates are over 2.1. And so the world's population, when I was born, 1966, the population, I don't even think it was 3 billion. I could check. I've checked before, but I know check right now. So what was the world's population? World population 1966. 3.4 billion. So just in my short lifetime, 57 years, the planet's population has more than doubled. If it had just doubled, we'd be at 6.8 billion. And it's countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Somalia, Sudan, sub-Saharan Africa, typically. These are the countries that have very high birth rates and fertility rates, and that is what is contributing. The Western world, not. And unfortunately, I wish I could offer a solution to this, but I don't have my hands on the levers. And the way the public discourse is directed, they try to keep us away from talking about this issue, because anyone who brings up immigration is automatically inferred to be a racist, which I am not. But it's just the way they do it. It's, an ad hominem attack. You don't have to listen to that individual. He's an old white guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a racist, and you're canceled. But so what? I've got a tick in every box for being canceled. I'm white, I'm male, I'm Christian, and I'm straight. 4 strikes and you're out. My voice is muted. And, my little YouTube channel is just kind of my poking my finger in the eye of the world in which we live, this crazy upside down world. But what they're doing is everything is just an excuse. This idea that the planet is running out of resources is an excuse. This idea that COVID was an extremely virulent, deadly pathogen, and that we had to stick stickers on the grocery aisle floors to tell which people to go. And this was just Robert Malone, an individual with whom I've actually spoken via a podcast. He has put out a video 2-3 years ago, and he called it He used the term mass formation psychosis. And that, I use the term PSYOP, psychological operation, a militaristic term given my background. That's what we've been undergoing. And it's not slowing down, it's accelerating. And by allowing large numbers of immigrants to come into countries like Canada, the US, and certainly in Western Europe, it destabilizes those countries, it destabilizes those societies. I hearken back to a book I read back in my university days. My education was centered on political science and the humanities. And one of the books that I read was called The Jungle, and it was written by an author by the name of Upton Sinclair, who was very much a socialist. And I have a lot of respect for the socialists of that era because they were warriors. Now the socialists of today's era, they tend to be limousine driving socialists. Socialists back in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, when the labor movement in the Western world was really taking root, they went to war. You look at the coal mines in Kentucky and Harlan County. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the Union leaders were killed. Their effort to organize workers and to use collective bargaining to improve people's standard of living. The mining companies wanted nothing to do with this, and union leaders and organizers were actually murdered. And Upton Sinclair wrote a book, and it was centered on the stockyards of Chicago in around 1910, 1920, somewhere in that general vicinity. And what he did is he actually went into the meatpacking industry in Chicago and worked in it himself to research this novel. And the primary character was a man by the name of Juris, Juris, or Jurgis, I can't remember. I'm 57. I'm going back almost 40 years now. But anyway, Juris, or I'm going to say Jurgis. Jurgis brought his wife, his newlywed wife, as well as a large extended family from a country like Lithuania. And he came and they landed in Chicago at the stockyards, the heart of the meatpacking industry. And he brought skill. He was a skilled butcher. He knew how to use a butcher's knives and such, and he knew how to cut up a cow or a pig or whatever animal. He had a high degree of skill. And so when he came to the meatpacking industry, he was able to earn a fairly decent buck. But when he arrived, there were union organizers trying to draw him in and to join with them. And Jurgis said, "No, niet, I'm not joining with you. You're not as good as me. I'm a better worker than you. I get more money. I have much skill. You guys go away from me. You're just lazy." And he went in and he started working. However, he found that even with his higher level of earning, that everyone in the extended family, his wife, his grandmother, or his mother-in-law, and his sister-in-law, everyone in the family had to work because the apartment that they rented was also owned by the same meatpacking plant that he worked at. And the only store to buy, the little general store, which had groceries and other general items, that was also owned by the company. And the prices were inflated, and he didn't make enough money. And then as time went on, he suffered an injury and he became weaker. And he starting at near the top of the pay scale, he started to go down, down, down. Amazing book if you ever want to read it. And I know, and I'm going to spoil it because I figure most people aren't going to read it anyway, is that at the end, he ends up becoming one of the union organizers. Things come full circle. And in a fashion, that's what I see as the ultimate goal behind these high levels of immigration. I don't think it's happening organically or by accident. I do believe it is 100% by design, because the individuals coming in, be they migrants from less developed countries, where the expectations for wages, standard of living, benefits, over constitutional rights, things like freedom of speech, freedom of expression, by inundating the population with massive levels of immigration, you can peter out, you can lower people's expectations. Left on our own, Canadians, Americans, Western Europeans, we're a privileged group. And there's an axiom in labor negotiations that says, once given, never taken away. Once once something is negotiated into a collective bargaining agreement, that it's nigh on impossible to ever take it away. If overtime kicks in at 40 hours, well, good luck trying to get it pushed up to 42 or 44. No, it's 40. And so by bringing in so many people, I do see it as being by design to combat this privileged attitude that North American, Western Europeans, developed countries that the populations have. We have high levels of expectations regarding all manner of things. And by taking populations that are coming from places where these notions of high wages, benefits, and everything else are far, my last video, I mentioned that in a lot of countries, just having access to clean water is seen as a luxury. And they come here with our water treatment facilities and everything, and well, who cares about the country they came from? A lot of these nations will have secret police. People can disappear into the night. I mean, look what happened in Chile. They had a president democratically elected president by the name of Allende, and Henry Kissinger and the U.S. apparatus, CIA, engaged in a coup d'etat. He was deposed, and the Chileans were given General Augusto Pinochet, who was horrible. So someone coming from a country like Chile to the United States or to Canada thinks they're in paradise, even if they're told, what to think, how to feel, what to believe. So this is a discussion we need to have. Unfortunately, I live in southeastern Ontario. I live in a small little town of 14,000 people. And I find it ironic, and I mention this to a lot of people when I'm talking. I say, it was 1978 when my family moved back from the United States to Canada permanently. And I was 12 years of age, and we moved to the GTA, the eastern end of the GTA city called Pickering. At that time, when we moved to Pickering, I think it was a population of 25,000-ish, and that was 1978. Now Pickering's population's got to be 150,000, like it's grown. It's blown up like crazy. But what Pickering was like in 1978 reminds me of what the town I live in now is like now. So, 45 odd years later, this little dot on the map reminds me of what Pickering was like in 1978. And what I mean by that is the population here right now is predominantly, I'll say, white Anglo-Saxon, whether Protestant or Catholic, but basically it's very European in nature. However, there's a very, there are more immigrants coming in now. We have a number of people who are Filipino, a number of people from the Caribbean, a lot of Ukrainians now, a number of Ukrainians, but it's becoming more diverse. And it's doing it in what I consider a healthy fashion. It contributes to the society, and it doesn't without destabilizing it. And Canada is not static. We're going to evolve, but you can't do, if you do things too fast, it can be too much of a good thing. And but the thing is, most immigrant populations, people coming into countries like Canada, people don't come to the area where I live. Initially, they move to the GTA, and it's quite often it's the children who then, that first generation comes in, they gravitate towards a large urban center like Toronto, they live within their community, broadly speaking, and then it's the children and the grandchildren who start spreading out. And I consider that a healthy situation. However, Toronto, I think, is just being swamped. And it eliminates Canadian culture. 1975, I mean, this is just my own personal experience. I was born in Canada in 1966 in Welland, near Niagara Falls. And then I was right around 6 months old when we moved to New York City. From New York City, we later moved, when I was going into kindergarten, we moved to New Jersey, first to one town, then another. I went through kindergartens, grade 1, 2, 3, and some of grade 4. And then during grade 4, we moved to Canada. That was in the year 1975. Moved to Canada, to Burlington, Ontario, which is on the western edge of the GTA. And I'm trying to remember the point I was trying to get at. Living in, I remember the culture of Canada in 1975, having just come from New Jersey. I noticed a really distinct difference. Hockey was huge, was massive. Town of Burlington, where I lived, they had A, B, and C based on skill level for every age group. You're either playing in the A division, the B division, or the C division. Being a kid from New Jersey who'd played hockey once a week on a figure skating rink that wasn't even a proper oval and didn't have benches or boards, you used to come in and off the ice through doors like a kitchen at a restaurant. You had this big swinging door, and our big thing to do as kids was to body check someone so that into that door, so that they would go into the lounge area, or they didn't even have change rooms. You just sat on a bench out in this little lounge area, and your dad would put your skates on and your equipment. And then I moved, so that was where I played hockey when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then we moved to Burlington, and now all of a sudden there was A level for the best players, B for the middle players, and C. I was thrown into the C division. And the words, everyone in Canada at that point referred to napkins as serviettes. Do you want a serviette? And I noticed a huge difference in Canadian culture. Canada was far more Canadian. It had a distinct culture. I found now Canada has very much become like the United States. I mean, even when I went to McDonald's as a 9-year-old, I'd come from New Jersey, where we talk, and my running shoes had turned into what I used to call my sneakers. They were now called my runners. And when I went to McDonald's and I wanted to get a hamburger, they would say, "Do you want chips with that?" I'm like, chips? No, I don't want potato chips. I want French fries. Yeah, chips. There's a big difference, and I find those differences we became part of Pax Americana, and Canadians back then said a lot. How you doing, eh? Where are you going, eh? Well, I went to the store, eh? And then this guy, you know what? He came up to me, eh? And A were huge. I found they've gone away. I still default to using the word process, Process. I say process, but the American pronunciation is process. And I find now even Canadians overwhelmingly use the word process. The Canadian identity basically got swallowed up by our southern neighbors. And now I find the same dynamic is taking place with massive levels of immigration coming in, that these national identities, national borders, national cultures, which I think are wonderful, regardless of whether it's, Caribbean culture or Eastern European culture or Asian culture or African culture or Middle Eastern culture, we can contribute to each other. But if we all become gray, for lack of a better term, that enrichment that we see is going to disappear. And it's something of a thesis statement of mine. I'll wrap it up with this. Sorry for going on so long. It's my habit. But the ultimate goal of all of these agendas, call it the Great Reset, Fourth Industrial Revolution, there's Agenda 2030, Agenda 2035. There's even an Agenda 2040. And you've got to read up on these things. And I'm not suggesting I've read everything, just a lot, but not everything, not even close to everything. Is that when I talk about they, I'm referring to groups like the World Economic Forum, where they get the corporate, government, and academic groups together to plan out the future of how to best manage this complicated world. It's a form of fascism. It's fascism at its core, is that they want to have humanity, what's left of it, if they're depopulating the planet, what's left of humanity as basically the digital property of our corporate masters. Government's there just to hold everyone's leash and keep us in line. There are elements of Marxism in it. This idea of a social credit score, which they have in China now. Shanghai City will be having a big rave party, but if you want to go, you have to have a social credit score of 1,200 or whatever the number is. And your social credit score is based on your behaviors. If you jaywalk, they can identify you through biometrics or even through your gait, because they have cameras everywhere, 5G technology, surveillance state, Big Brother's always watching you. And if you jaywalk, well, then your social credit score goes down. If you're late to work, your social credit score goes down. If you express the wrong view on your social media networks, you go down. But if you do good things, it goes higher. And then the degree to which you're able to participate in society is based on your social credit score. And I do think they want to bring that in here. People get confused, I think, between fascism and communism. And ultimately, for an individual citizen concerned with their rights, their liberties, their freedom, neither one is good, Marxist or fascist. I mean, the two systems meet at Totalitarian Boulevard. But the difference is fascism is corporate ownership. There's still private corporations, and the government is basically at their beck and call. Whereas in a communistic system, it's the state itself which owns what Marx called the means of production. So there is no private industry. Everything's owned just by the government. And in terms of a society advancing and achieving aims, fascism works better than communism, but for an individual citizen, it makes no difference. You're living under tyranny in either case. And so I'll end it there. I'm going to be up in around 45 minutes. I do these too long. That was one of the criticisms I get. That's one of the criticisms I get frequently, is that the attention span of the population We live in the TikTok world. 1, 2, 3 minutes, anything over 10 minutes, and you can't invest the time. And I'm guilty of it too. I look at videos and I say, oh, that looks interesting. Oh my God, an hour and a half, forget it. I don't have the time to invest. But sometimes I watch a lot now of Jordan Peterson's podcasts. I find them very enlightening. Don't always agree with them, but I do like his style. I also watched a guy by the name of Altian Childs, and there's an interesting video if you ever want to watch it. If you can find it, it gets taken down all the time, but he talks about the Masonic element to groups like the World Economic Forum. That gets a little more conspiratorial in nature, but I do think he's very much on the money. I'm saying perfectly, but I think his arrow is hitting close to the center of the target. But anyway, thank you for watching. And as always, if you want to give me a thumbs up, that helps. When you're trying to inject your voice into the public discourse, it helps to, the algorithms suppress things, and certain things can increase your visibility. One of them I understand. I'm led to believe that likes help, subscriptions help, and I do think they do, because people will look and go, oh, that guy's got 12 subscribers, bang. He's got 100, maybe he's got something decent to say. If I could get myself up to a few hundred, maybe even 1,000 or more, that would help. But goodness knows, I'm not going to engage services. I'm not going to pay some company to give me subscribers, views, and likes. I know it works, but I don't, I consider it genuinely, I consider it dishonest. So anyway, God bless, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you again. I'm going to take a break for at least a couple nights. I won't be doing one tomorrow. Good night.